It's the Pioneer 100 podcast, where we celebrate the history of Pioneer and look forward to the future. I'm your host, Max Armstrong, and in this week's episode, we look at the farming technologies beyond genetics. Hello, everyone. I'm Max Armstrong, welcoming you to another Pioneer 100 episode in our podcast series, looking back over the 100 years of Pioneer and so many not only life-changing, but very interesting innovations that have come along in Pioneer's century. And today we're going to focus on the role of advancing mechanization and other farming technologies on beyond the genetics. And we're going to be chatting here, first of all, with Jordan Spear. Jordan is the Productivity Global Lead, and Josh Morgan is joining us here as well, Automation and Field Technology Leader. Welcome, you two. I know that from visiting with you, both of you have been with the company just about 2 decades. That's a wealth of experience in your own right there. But Josh, I guess I would ask you to start off here. You know, most people associate Pioneer with breeding, but when you take a look at how the company has revolutionized the seed processing business, it is also very interesting. And you, I understand, built the industry's first dedicated seed house and parent seed department going back into the late 20s. And it was very radical for the time, was it not?
Yeah, it absolutely was, Max. Few thoughts on that. I mean, first off, if you just take a step back and think about Pioneer, right? We're about innovation. And if you go back to the 20s, there was a time when farmers were looking at ears and saying, hey, well, this is the best looking ear, this is the best seed, so I'm gonna turn around, I'm gonna put that in the ground, and it's gonna yield me in an optimal fashion. But what we learned is that wasn't true. Pioneer in the late 20s developed the hybrid seed, and so as Pioneer moved forward with hybrid seed, they had a need to innovate above and beyond just the seed. We needed processes, tools, capabilities, and systems to curate and organize and care for those parent lines, the mothers and the fathers of the seed, if you will, to ensure that we have optimum quality seed, but also the purity, so that when we make the crosses, we end up putting in every bag exactly what we say is in the bag.
So that quality was of utmost importance, and you had to maintain it through the process.
It is, and Jordan can reflect on this too. If I just stop and think about kind of our roles and what we do in the company, and I reflect back 100 years ago, Pioneer was focused on innovation. They were focused on quality. They were focused on seed purity. And Jordan and I are sitting here today, and we're really focusing on the same things. Like, we still think about innovation every day. We think about quality, and we think about purity. So it's always been part of our foundation, and it still is much of what we do today.
Jordan, in the 1930s and in the 1940s, I understand Pioneer introduced some new production innovations that helped advance hybrid corn. The company had a lot of firsts in this area, we were told by those who have looked at the history. Talk about some of those milestones that came through that decade of the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, Max, and so it's been important from day one that we maintain quality. Right, and the customer has expectations of what they are going to get when they open a bag of Pioneer seed, and so one of the early things that we needed to do back in the 30s was, how do we dry corn in fields, right, and so developing portable dryer systems so that we could get that grain to a point where it can travel, right? It can have shelf life, and so getting it down to 12% moisture was really important. And so I think through development, through experimentation, we were able to identify ways to maintain that quality that the customer comes to expect in a bag of Pioneer seed.
I can imagine some of that equipment used back in the day really had a strange look to it. did it
Yeah,
not?
it did, and you know, I would take it all the way back to in the 40s when you know we transitioned from mostly hand harvesting and hand shelling into mechanization, right? And so we as the need to scale our seed production increased, we needed to find ways to do the same thing faster, better. With greater repeatability and quality, and so as we mechanized harvesting, for example, and seed processing, you know, one of the things, as we talked about earlier, no matter how we did it, we still needed to maintain quality, right? And so by adding mechanization to our process, one of the other things we had to do was we had to evaluate every mechanization process to ensure it wasn't impacting quality in a negative way. Right, and so making sure that, again, that the customer was getting what he or she expected from a bag of Pioneer seed.
Detasseling.
Yeah.
I think of that crucial process still today, of course, but how has it evolved over the years? How did it start? at
Yeah,
Pioneer?
so detasseling's a big one, and you know, many people that are probably listening to this maybe started as high school kids detasseling, right? And you know, detasseling has evolved from being a manual process to, you know, through the 70s we were able to add mechanization to detasseling, and so we could pull the tassels off the plant or cut the tassels off the plant. Where today we're using genetics and with technologies such as male sterility, it's called, gives us the ability to produce hybrid corn without the need for detasseling. And so again, an evolution that you know, has brought us the ability to scale our operation to meet the demands and the expectations of our customers today.
Planting. Was there a milestone or two there in those early years that you wouldn't think about today, but my goodness, it was probably industry changing?
Yeah, the mechanization of planting has been industry changing, right? And actually, you know, as an organization, as a Pioneer company, you know, we as a global company, I mean, we still have countries around the world where mechanization is not fully developed, and so, you know, we're continually working even today at implementing new planter technologies, knowing that getting that seed planted in an ideal manner and getting early season growth is critical in our production environments.
You know, over the years, Josh, Pioneer has often had to act on its own engineering, the innovation engine, I guess, that has been driving the change along the way. What are some of the most unique technologies that Pioneer has brought here? Things that really stand out in your mind?
Yeah, this is a fun question for me. I've been in our engineering department for a couple of decades, and so the amount of innovation that we've brought to the company has been really exciting. And maybe just a few thoughts to set this up. I think, you know, a lot of people think of Pioneer as a science company and a seed company, and it is. But when you think about the most innovative science, somewhere along the lines in the last number of decades, you've got to have innovative engineering to support that innovative science, right? So Pioneer is on the cutting edge of technology and capabilities, and we live on that bleeding edge, and many times the market doesn't have available to us exactly what we need, right? So sometimes we just have to take a step back and say, okay, what's it take to develop some new capability or technology? So one of those that I think is a great story is in the phenotyping space. If you think of the fact that we developed hybrids, and over time their plant architecture changed, and we wanted to test wind events, things like brittle snap and root lodging and stalk lodging. So we took a step back and we said, in the early 2000s, what if we created a over the canopy, fully mobile wind machine that could drive through the corn and apply different wind events to our varieties that we're bringing through the R&D pipeline to ensure that they have those ratings relative to wind that are critically important to the farmers. So we developed something called Boreas.
Boreas, I'm curious, I'm trying to visualize what it looks like. Could you?
Yeah, the Boreas machine, great question. There's several embodiments, first off. One of them that's maybe the most interesting if you're a farmer and you enjoy technology and horsepower. We've got one on tracks. It lifts up in the air with clearance over a full height canopy of corn. It's something like 13, 14 foot tall in the end. We've got 4 diesel engines that run some big fans. And those fans in the machine itself have the capability to generate different wind events. So we've learned a lot about wind. We've looked at how the wind goes through a canopy and what wind events affect our crops. And so then we built our machine to mimic those capabilities. So we can do 40 mile an hour wind with heavy wind bursts, or we can do all the way up to wind equivalent to an F2 tornado. And as you can imagine, that does a lot of damage. So we can look at every spectrum with Boreas and evaluate our products. So a number of other technologies that we could think about. Let's first continue with the phenotyping space, right? We care about evaluating our products in every way possible. The more data we have, the better science we can do. So if you think of looking at a plot that exists out in a research field, if you could look beyond what the human eye could see, if you could evaluate holistically a plot and put together all the variables like ear height and plant height and what the tassels look like and the stalk diameter, and then you overlay capabilities from what the Boreas machine can provide and many other tools and capabilities, the molecular marker information that we'll probably talk about here in a little bit. Suddenly you have a data set that allows you to evaluate our varieties from every perspective. And all of that data goes back to our breeders, allowing them to create better products for the farmers.
Are sensors a part of that?
Sensors are a big part of that, especially the past decade. Our sensor domain is growing and growing. We've got suites of sensors with computing systems that are onboard drones and other mobile platforms that we use to go through our fields and evaluate our crops.
Drones.
Yes.
Is that a fairly recent development at Pioneer, or were you using them? You mentioned that
Yeah.
cutting edge.
It's been a while, right? It's not terribly new here, but they continue to advance. As technology advances, we move with it, but we're always pushing the drones to the limits with what sensors we can put on them and what information we can collect.
It strikes me when we're talking about the machines out in the field that planters have to have sensors as well. I mean, so that you've got complete data collection through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things we could touch on there. Quick story about combines and planters. In R&D, like I said, we're on that bleeding edge of technology, and when we go and look for a combine for our research plots, they don't necessarily have all the capabilities, the sensors, the tools to get the level of data we're interested in and the accuracy that we're interested in. So, a good number of years ago, about 2010, we went out on our own in our engineering team, and we built a combine from scratch that was specifically geared towards R&D plots and collecting the best information possible.
From scratch?
From scratch. We prototyped it, we patented it, and now it's being produced by a partner out there, and we use them around the world as part of our fleet.
I suppose from that initial unit, you've improved it through the years.
Absolutely, yeah. With engineering, there's always change and improvement, and we learn a little bit every season. With our mechanization, our automation, just like we do on our plant varieties, we continue to grow and improve. You mentioned planting, though. Real quickly, we've also developed many different types of planters over the years. There's one that Jordan and others were part of, where we automated the seed inside these small clamshells, and those clamshells then are automatically destacked and opened and put into the row unit, and that gives us we think a real advantage in ensuring every seed goes into the right plot. There's benefits and value from a people perspective, and so that's been a great technology, and we've got a whole suite of technologies and capabilities in the background to organize and sort our seed and package it.
Jordan, talking about the area of seed delivery. Let's visit about how that's changed. All the way from the cloth bag to the plastic with the Pro Box today. Visit with us about some of the things that have evolved there.
Yeah, I see we have a Pro Box here, Max. We're continually wanting to deliver our seed in a way that is productive and efficient for our customers. And you bring up the cloth bags, right? And way back in our early days, people were getting their seed through the mail, right? And so that was the way to do it, right? And then as the scale of farming increased and hybrid seed demands increased, we moved into paper bags and jumbo bags, and then more recently in the late 90s. Pioneer was key in creating an industry standard, the Pro Box, right? And that gave farmers an ability to deliver seed to the planters in a very efficient way. And then that has really transitioned into our True Bulk system, where we're actually we're delivering in a bulk perspective, and so we continue to evolve in that space. Continue to try to help the farmer improve the efficiency of their operations. We want it to be easy to utilize the seed in a Pioneer bag.
And your reps out there in the field, of course, are an important part of that process. You have to work with them. It has to be something that they can use as well.
That's right. It's got to be easy to easy to move around, easy to transport in the field. It's got to be easy to store, and so yeah, always looking for new ways to do things.
Earlier, Jordan, you mentioned molecular markers. Flesh out that story a little bit for us.
Yeah, if you take a step back to the 80s, we got into the molecular marker business, starting labs, and I think what an amazing capability, and how I don't know if anything's changed us more in the past decades than molecular markers have, but they're critically important for a number of things. One, just from a quality and purity perspective, right? We can take any lot of seed and we can analyze it in such a way to say that there's 99 point whatever % purity in that bag. Historically, that had to be done through growing out seed, using time in acres, and that cost time, it costs money, and so now we have a higher level of accuracy with molecular markers. But on the R&D side with molecular markers, there's also a really great story, right? Imagine you're developing new varieties, and you've got we'll just use a number like 1,000. You've got 1,000 varieties that you've put out there that you're interested in, and you could wait to grow all those out, see what they look like from a phenotypic perspective, or you could take a leaf tissue sample, or maybe even before you plant it, you take a little small sample of the seed and you analyze that DNA, and you look at it and say, well, does it have the traits that I'm interested in? Does it have the markers that represent what a breeder's looking for? And if it does, great, go ahead and advance it. If not, maybe you cull that in the field and just eliminate it, or you just never plant it. Molecular markers allow us to drive that wide funnel. And the wider we can make our funnel, the more shots on goal kind of opportunity we have to get that next best product to the farmer. So yeah, molecular markers have been really amazing technology and capability. And if you were to take a tour and wander around our labs, you'd see an immense amount of robotics and automation that would really be impressive and show you the true capabilities of what we have from a mechanization and automation and capability here at Pioneer.
Jordan, we're now seeing vision technology and artificial intelligence in seed plants. How does this move Pioneer from just simple yield estimates to true quality sorting of that seed?
Yeah, Max, it's an exciting area of development. Not only in our industry, but how do we use AI? How do we use vision technology, especially at a production plant? And so, if you think back in our early history, if you will, and we would have people that would be sorting bad ears out of a batch of ears, right? Or we'd have people sorting poor kernels out of a bucket of kernels, right? Because we, again, going back to the expectation the customer has and the uniformity and the quality of that bag of seed. We can do that today with vision technology. And so we have cameras that are placed along the seed assembly line, if you will, within our production plants that take poor seeds, take ears with poor quality out of the system for us. Again, ensuring the uniformity of all those kernels that are going in a Pioneer seed bag at the end of the day.
Well, Josh, despite all of these high-tech changes in mechanization and engineering, how has the ultimate goal of selling a high-quality unit of seed remained unchanged? Quality is still, at the end of the day, after 100 years, the essential element.
It's a great question, right? We're sitting here listening to a podcast. We're talking a bit about mechanization and automation and molecular markers. And it tells a great story of kind of how we're getting to how we've got to where we're at and where we're going. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure the farmer cares that we have a Boreas wind machine. I think what they care about is that when a wind event hits, right, their corn's still standing, right? So when we think about quality, when we think about purity, when we look at these, Jordan and I live and breathe this every day, right? And as we reflect and we look around the company and all the people that we've worked with over the years, there's a passion at Pioneer. It comes through, it bleeds green, we say, right? Where every individual really, truly cares about bringing that next great product with the right traits, with the right quality and the right purity, and making sure what's in that bag is exactly what we say it's going to be.
Josh Monglin, Jordan Spear, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your part of that Pioneer 100 story. We appreciate having you here with us on the podcast.
Thanks, Max.
We hope you'll join us for the next episode as we continue Pioneer's century, looking back, and we enjoy bringing to you several different elements of all it takes to get the seed to you farmers. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Pioneer 100 podcast. Join us next time as we continue to explore the rich history of Pioneer and its connection to the agriculture of tomorrow. Visit pioneer.com/100 to learn more.